I watched my sister-in-law walk down the aisle in a white dress at my wedding and smile at me like she was the bride, not me. She stood a little too close to my fiancé, her hand brushing his arm, whispering something that made him smirk while I was standing there in my own gown, completely invisible. Then she raised her glass during the reception and said, "Some women just don't know how to keep a man interested," and the room filled with quiet laughter that cut deeper than anything I had ever felt. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just jealousy. This was humiliation, planned and executed right in front of everyone I loved. And if you've ever felt that kind of betrayal, only if this story truly resonates with you, take a second to like this video, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there, because I want to know I'm not alone in this. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 29 years old, and this is the night my wedding turned into the moment I uncovered the darkest secret in my own family. It all started 3 weeks before the ceremony, on a quiet Tuesday night, when something small felt completely wrong. 3 weeks before the wedding, I was sitting on our couch at exactly 10:18 p.m., scrolling through seating charts on my laptop while Daniel was in the kitchen, his voice low, almost careful, as he spoke on the phone. It was not unusual at first. He worked late, took calls, handled things I did not always understand, but something about the way he said her name made my fingers stop moving over the keyboard. Chloe. Not casual, not annoyed, not distant like siblings usually sound. Soft, controlled, familiar in a way that made my stomach tighten. I told myself I was overthinking, that wedding stress was making me paranoid, but then he laughed, quietly, like he did when he was trying not to be heard, and I had never heard him laugh like that with her before. I stood up slowly, my bare feet silent against the hardwood floor, and moved closer, just enough to hear him say, "She has no idea. Just give me a little more time." My chest felt like it dropped straight through the floor. I stepped back before he could see me, my heart pounding so loud I was sure it would give me away, and I returned to the couch, forcing myself to sit, to breathe, to act normal when he walked back in 30 seconds later with that same easy smile I had trusted for 3 years. I wanted to ask him right then, to demand answers, to say I heard everything, but something inside me stopped me, something colder, sharper, telling me to wait. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed that tone in his voice, the way he said her name, the way he said I had no idea. The next morning, I did something I had never done before in our relationship. I checked his laptop. I told myself it was just to calm my nerves, just to prove to myself that I was being ridiculous. But the moment I opened it, I knew I was not going to find comfort. His email was still logged in. There were dozens of unread messages, contracts, confirmations, normal things, until I saw one thread that did not belong. No subject line, just a string of messages between him and a contact saved as C. My hands started shaking before I even clicked it. The messages were short, careful, but unmistakable. "She is distracted with the wedding. We will figure out the timing. You promised this would be over before the honeymoon." I felt like I could not breathe. My vision blurred, but I kept reading, scrolling further back, each message peeling back another layer of something I did not recognize in the man I was about to marry. There were references to meetings, late nights, excuses I remembered believing without question. And then one message stopped me completely. "You looked beautiful last night. I wish we did not have to pretend." I stared at the screen, my reflection faintly visible in the black border, a woman I barely recognized looking back at me. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just sat there, completely still, as everything I thought I knew about my life began to shift into something darker. I heard the shower turn off down the hall, and in that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I closed the laptop exactly as I found it, wiped my fingerprints from the surface without even thinking, and went back to the kitchen to pour myself a glass of water like nothing had happened. Because if they thought I had no idea, I was going to make sure they kept believing that for as long as I needed. I started paying attention to everything after that night, not just what Daniel said, but what he did not say. The pauses in his sentences, the way his phone never left his hand, the way Chloe suddenly became more involved in our wedding plans without me asking for it. She would show up unannounced with suggestions about the seating, the flowers, even my dress, always smiling too sweetly, always acting like she was helping while slowly taking control of things that were supposed to be mine. At first, I played along, nodding, thanking her, letting her believe she was getting exactly what she wanted, because the more comfortable she became, the less careful she was. One afternoon, she came over while Daniel was still at work, holding a garment bag and insisting I try on a backup dress she had picked out just in case something went wrong with mine. I remember the way she watched me as I unzipped it, her eyes sharp, almost expectant, and when I pulled the dress out, my hands froze. It was white. Not ivory, not champagne, not anything subtle. Pure white, almost identical to my own gown. I looked up at her, confused, and she just laughed lightly, brushing it off like it was nothing. "Oh, come on, it is just a dress," she said, tilting her head, studying my reaction like it was some kind of test. "You are not the only one allowed to look good that day." Something in her tone made my skin crawl, but I forced a smile, pretending I did not understand what she was really doing. That night, I checked Daniel's phone while he was asleep. I knew his passcode. I always had. I had never needed to use it before, but now my hands moved without hesitation. The message thread with her was not even hidden. It was right there, like they wanted to be caught, but only on their terms. I scrolled slowly, my heart pounding in my ears, reading words that made everything painfully clear without ever needing to say anything explicit. They talked about timing, about waiting until after the wedding, about how it would be easier once everything was finalized. There were jokes, private ones, things I did not understand, references to moments they had shared that I had not been a part of. And then I saw a message from her, sent just 2 nights before. "She really thinks this is her day," followed by a laughing emoji. Daniel's reply came seconds later. "Let her. It will be over soon." I stared at those words for a long time, longer than I realized, until the screen dimmed and went black, leaving me sitting there in the dark with a truth I could not ignore anymore. This was not a mistake. This was not confusion or crossed boundaries. This was something deliberate, something planned, something they were both fully committed to. And yet the most terrifying part was not the betrayal itself. It was how confident they were that I would never figure it out, that I would walk down that aisle, smile for the photos, say my vows, completely unaware of what was waiting for me on the other side. I placed his phone back exactly where it had been, careful not to wake him, and lay there staring at the ceiling until the first light of morning crept through the curtains. I did not cry. I did not confront him. I did something far more dangerous. I started thinking. I started connecting every small detail, every odd moment, every conversation that had not quite made sense before. And slowly, piece by piece, a much bigger picture began to form, one that made my stomach twist in a way I could not explain yet, because whatever they were planning, it was not just about the wedding, and I had a feeling I had only uncovered the surface of it. Once I stopped reacting and started observing, everything began to shift into place in a way that made my skin feel tight, like I was living inside a version of my life that had been carefully staged without my consent. Chloe was no longer just inserting herself into small details. She was everywhere. At the florist appointment, correcting my choices. At the venue walkthrough, suggesting changes to the layout. Even speaking to vendors directly, as if she had authority I had never given her. And Daniel never stopped her. Not once. He would just stand there, hands in his pockets, watching the two of us with that same unreadable expression, occasionally stepping in to agree with her, gently, subtly, but always in her favor. It was never enough to start a scene, never enough for anyone else to notice, but it was enough for me to understand that whatever was happening between them was not hidden by accident. It was hidden because they believed I would accept it. One afternoon, I received a call from the venue coordinator, confirming a last-minute change to the reception schedule, something about adjusting the order of speeches. I had not approved any changes. When I asked who requested it, there was a pause on the other end before she said Chloe's name. I thanked her calmly, hung up, and sat there staring at the wall as a quiet realization settled over me. Chloe was not just trying to humiliate me. She was positioning herself. That night, I went back to the messages, this time reading slower, more carefully, looking for patterns instead of shock. That is when I saw it. A message I had missed before because it was buried between casual conversation. After the ceremony, we finalize everything. Her signature will make it clean. I read that sentence over and over again until the words lost meaning and then snapped back into focus all at once. Signature. Finalize everything. My mind immediately went to the documents Daniel had asked me to sign earlier that week. Paperwork, he said, was routine, something about merging accounts, updating beneficiary information, preparing for our future together. I had not signed them yet. I had told him I wanted to review everything after the wedding, something he had brushed off with a tight smile and a quick change of subject. My hands felt cold as I stood up and walked to his home office, opening the drawer where he kept important papers. It did not take long to find the folder. My name was already typed neatly across multiple pages, sections highlighted, tabs marking where I needed to sign. I flipped through slowly, my heart beating louder with every page, until I reached a clause that made everything stop. A joint trust, controlled by him, with provisions that gave decision-making authority to a secondary party in the event of emotional instability or incapacity. My eyes moved to the name listed under that clause, Chloe Carter. I let out a slow breath, one that felt like it came from somewhere deep and steady, because in that moment, the full picture finally revealed itself. This was not about embarrassment. This was not about some reckless affair hidden behind my back. This was a plan to marry me, secure my assets, and then quietly remove me from control of my own life, using a legal structure that would look legitimate to anyone who did not know the truth. And they had timed it perfectly. The wedding, the pressure, the assumption that I would sign anything placed in front of me without question because I trusted him, because I loved him. I closed the folder carefully, placing everything back exactly where I found it, my movements slow, precise, controlled. For the first time since this started, I felt something other than shock or confusion. I felt clarity. And with that clarity came a decision that changed everything. I was not going to confront them. I was not going to stop the wedding. I was going to let it happen exactly the way they planned. Because if they wanted a stage, I was going to give them one they would never forget. From that moment on, every smile I gave them was calculated. Every nod, every soft okay was part of something much bigger than they could even imagine. I started agreeing to everything Chloe suggested, letting her pick the seating arrangements, the music, even adjusting the timeline exactly the way she wanted it, watching the subtle satisfaction in her eyes grow stronger each day. Daniel relaxed too. I could see it in the way his shoulders dropped, the way he stopped watching me so carefully, convinced that I was exactly where they needed me to be. Distracted, trusting, easy to control. I even told him I would sign the documents after the ceremony, just like he wanted, and the relief in his voice when I said that told me everything I needed to know. They thought they were close to winning. They thought all they had to do was get through one perfect day. What they did not know was that I had already started preparing my own version of that day. I reached out to a lawyer quietly, someone my father had trusted years ago, and I sat across from him in a small office 2 miles from our apartment, explaining everything without emotion, just facts, messages, documents, timelines. He listened carefully, asked precise questions, and then looked at me in a way that confirmed what I already understood. "You have more control here than you think," he said, sliding a folder toward me filled with options I had never considered before. I did not need to stop the wedding. I needed to document everything, so I did. I saved every message I could access, took photos of every document, recorded conversations when I could without being obvious, building a quiet archive of truth that grew heavier with every passing day. Meanwhile, Chloe became bolder. She stopped pretending to be helpful and started making comments that were sharper, more direct, testing how far she could push me. At the rehearsal dinner, she stood beside Daniel again, laughing a little too loudly, and leaned toward me just enough to whisper, "I hope you are ready for tomorrow," her voice carrying a meaning that only I could fully understand. I met her eyes and smiled, steady, calm, almost grateful. "I am," I said, and for the first time, she hesitated, just for a second, like something about my reaction did not match what she expected. That moment told me I was ready. The morning of the wedding arrived clear and bright, sunlight pouring through the windows as everything moved exactly as planned. My dress hung perfectly pressed, my hair was styled, my makeup flawless, every detail in place for a day that was supposed to mark the beginning of a new life. And in a way, it still would. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at myself not as a bride waiting to be chosen, but as someone who had already chosen what came next. When I walked down that aisle, I was not walking toward Daniel. I was walking into a moment I had built piece by piece, one they believed belonged to them. And as the music started, and the doors opened. I saw Chloe standing there ahead, already in white, already smiling like she had won, completely unaware that every step I took toward her was part of something that was about to change everything. The room stayed silent long after the screen went dark, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air itself is trying to process what just happened. And I remember standing there, still in my dress, not shaking, not crying, just still, as everything they built collapsed in front of everyone who mattered. Chloe could not look at me anymore, her confidence gone in an instant, replaced by something raw and exposed. And Daniel, he just stood there, frozen, like he had never imagined a world where he was not in control. I did not yell. I did not argue. I simply stepped back, handed the microphone to the coordinator, and walked out of the room I was never meant to lose myself in. That was months ago, and my life now looks nothing like what I thought it would be. But in ways I never expected, it feels lighter, clearer, and finally honest. I moved into a small apartment just outside the city, about 20 minutes from where I used to live, and for the first time in a long time, everything in my space feels like it belongs to me, not something shared, not something negotiated, just mine. I wake up in the morning without second-guessing myself, without wondering if I missed something, without that quiet anxiety that used to sit in my chest like a constant weight. And I have learned something through all of this that I wish someone had told me earlier, something simple but powerful. Your intuition is not something to ignore. It is something to protect. When something feels off, when someone makes you question your worth, your reality, your voice, that is not love, that is control. And no relationship, no family, no future is worth losing yourself in the process. If you are listening to this and you feel that quiet doubt inside you, the one you keep pushing down because it is inconvenient or uncomfortable, I want you to know that it matters. You matter. And you have the right to pause, to question, to step back, to protect your time, your finances, your emotional space, before someone else decides those things for you. I also learned to be careful with trust, not in a way that makes you cold, but in a way that makes you aware. Love should not require blindness. It should not ask you to ignore patterns or dismiss your own instincts. It should feel safe, steady, and honest, not confusing or quietly draining. And healing is not dramatic. It is quiet. It is choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and yourself over the version of you that someone else tried to shape. I believe, in my own way, that something greater watches over us, whether you call it God, the universe, or simply your inner voice. And sometimes it allows things to fall apart not to punish you, but to wake you up before you lose even more. So if you are going through something like this, please be gentle with yourself, take your time, and remember that walking away is not losing. It is choosing yourself. Thank you for staying with me through this story, for listening, for being here, because sometimes just knowing someone else understands makes the weight a little lighter. If this story meant something to you, you can share where you are listening from, or simply stay and listen to another story, and know that you are not alone in this. My name is Emily Carter. I am 29 years old, and the lesson I want to leave with you is this: never ignore the quiet voice inside you, because it will always tell you the truth before anyone else does.